So as I said, continuing from before, capital is not simply money. Capital is not about wealth. Of course, there is a connection between them. But we talked about factors of production, and this is the core of the entire concept of capital. What we invest into the process of production, there we are talking about capital. The reification of money in means of production. This is the important part. So usually what we talk about, or what we see as factors of production, is especially the three. Namely, land, labor, and capital. This is now the question of factors of production. And the reification is taking place here in terms of machines, tools, buildings, whatever we need. We have the other two, where we invest the money we have. But this is another story. We invest into land, we invest into labor, we invest into land, we invest into labor. There's this idea of intellectual capital. We invest into our education, which then makes our labor power more valuable, expertise. And we have social capital. Order, law, conduct, and content. We know people. We can mobilize other people and bring them in. One of the basic social capital abilities, capabilities, is actually being on time. This changed fundamentally with capitalism, that people had to come on time to work. And this time was not defined by the weather. This time was not defined by your own thinking of, now I can work and I work for 16 hours or for 2 hours. But it was organized in the framework of the firm. You had to show up at, let's say, 8 o'clock. These had been the lucky workers who started late. And you could leave at 5. And if you didn't, there was a penalty if you had been lucky. If you had not been lucky, you had not been coming in. You had been not able to enter. Which meant literally the loss, the complete loss of wages, of income. Even if you had been 5 minutes late, they may have said, okay, the first hour you haven't been here. I don't consider this as being present. So deduction of the income for 1 hour. Now you can discuss for a long time the means of intellectual capital and social capital because in some way or another it's linked to the labor. Intellectual capital means you are better educated to do this job. If you're highly educated but don't have a driving license, don't apply to be a bus driver. You may apply, but forget it, you won't get the job, most likely. So in this way, it is part of this labor thing, social capital as well. This is something I, as employer, would take into account. Is this person reliable, coming on time? Does it have the language proficiency? If there is language included in the job. Does it have, I wouldn't say contacts, but social contactability? If you work in a shop as salesperson, you're always standing in the corner, don't look at me. I would say, well, sorry, you want to sell stuff, go into the store. You can work there, but don't work with the customer. They will immediately turn around and say, I don't dare to disturb this person. What happens there? You may jump at me. So the fourth moment, factor of production, is entrepreneurship, with a nice English, very English term, entrepreneur. The proper English translation would be the undertaker, but the undertaker has this other funny meaning, so we leave the entrepreneur. The idea there is the entrepreneur, the owner of the capital, brings things together, combines the different factors of production. Simplified, it doesn't work, or the work is only consisting of bringing things together, including creativity, which is as well, of course, something of social capital and intellectual capital. I'm creative, I can think about new ways of producing something or producing something new. And this is my skill as entrepreneur, and availing of the capital, I can invest according to what I need there. Now, we talked about it, and this is important as well to assess the entire problematic of the production. Fictional commodities. Machines are commodities. I can buy them on the market. They are produced in order to be included into the process of production. Tools, the same. They can be produced, they can be reproduced at the end without end, meaning it can go on and can go on and can go on. Land is not really a commodity. It goes into the capitalist process of production as commodity, meaning I buy it on the market. Insofar it is a commodity. But to produce and reproduce land is very limited. There are some ways to gain a little bit of land, but it is, as I say, very limited. I was once visiting a colleague in Amsterdam. There was a little celebration, farewell to one of the colleagues there, and we celebrated in his house. And then he said, actually we have to hope that the man at the dike holds his finger tightly to the possible hole in the dike, because we are actually, I think, 6 feet under sea level. So a large part of the Netherlands is actually gained from the sea. So the Dutch people are good. If you want to have land, just go to the Netherlands and ask somebody if he can gain you some land, produce some land. They do it actually in Ireland as well. There is a huge erosion of the coastline, and they secure the land and actually gain land with it. So it is possible, but of course it is very limited. Usually you have the other way around. Land is getting more and more scarce. So this makes it possible to deal with it, to trade it on the market. But you cannot reproduce it. You cannot produce it as other products. Labor is linked to human life. It's people who are working, living people Of course, I reproduce people, giving birth. Well, I don't. But this is part of human life. It is not meant to be producing workforce. It is not meant to be means under certain conditions, I use it, I invest into it, and say, this is actually what I want. I want to produce workforce, labor force. Because this is the way of maintaining myself. And this is as well what happens then in terms of calculating wages, calculating income. What does it cost to reproduce your ability to work, your labor power, in terms of education? But beforehand, before you come to this, in terms of simply surviving. What kind of food? What amount of food? How much shelter? Meaning as well, how healthy do I have to be to do this and that job? How much sleep do I need? Leaving aside that this is always an individual issue, but there is a minimum given just to fulfill the task, to survive. Even some wise hermits supposedly living from nothing, I at some stage detected that they are living from something. I heard this story, there was one of these guys sitting there being wise and looking wise and not eating for ages, and then they detected he had peanuts in the beard and was always shoveling the peanuts. So don't trust if anybody says, I do without sleep, without drinking, without eating. There's some trick to it. Even if it is the trick, you can do it for some time, limit this, but you cannot do it for good and perform. It is about life. It is about the land we live. It's about what we usually call natural environment. This is not there as means of production, as factor of production. It is used for it, and you see the disastrous consequences of this if you go to certain areas. Rainforest being completely destroyed, taking the foundation on which people live. If you go to, for instance, that's the only part where I know it, where I experienced it, Papua New Guinea, PNG, make things easy, PNG, where exactly this happened. They took away the foundation of the life of people who lived there. So they couldn't live anymore because their foundation was gone, and others made profit because they took the rainforest out there and used it for whatever they were producing as raw material. So it is used as commodity, but it is fictional because it is not produced and reproduced for this purpose. We talked about this, just coming back to this, and there you see this, who owns, who has control over the means of production, over the factors of production. Can I control, for instance, the time I'm working? Can I control the production in terms of the means of production I need to be productive? Can I control my education and how I apply it? Or is it done by somebody else? I mentioned Henry Ford in a different context today. I mentioned Charlie Chaplin, the Modern Times, the production that happens there. But I still didn't manage to watch the entire film. But this is exactly what happens. Repetitive work, you do always the same. This is one part of the burden, but the other thing is it is controlled by somebody else, even by the machine. This gives you the social contact you have, because you don't have any social contact. You're just sitting there doing what you have to do. And it determines as well, for instance, the time. You cannot say, well, I work a little bit faster, because others depend on your actual work. You do the one thing, and after you do this, somebody else can step in and do the next thing. You cannot say, okay, you build this, I'll come later and come with the times. There is a certain sequence to it that is given by the entire technology, but with this as well by those who own the technology, who have the control over the technology. On the one hand, it's simply the legal ownership. On the other hand, it is, and increasingly playing a role, the technological ownership. Can I deal with this? If this is one thing, if the entrepreneurship is actually going hand in hand with the person who owns legally the property, in terms of property rights, the stuff, this is one question that has to be considered, at least to some extent, separately. So what we have, and we talked about it, factors of production is a matter of technological change, of change of patterns of consumption, of lifestyles, changing lifestyles, and as well of changing regulation. Regulation in terms of law. Who is allowed to do what? Competition, we have usually in capitalist economies some competition law which does not allow to do certain things that are considered not to be in line with free competition. Now, this is a matter that is politically, of course, contested. On the one hand, those who are competing and who are successfully competing, they don't want to be limited in their competition. But as well, there is another thing. What is a dominant market position? Microsoft is frequently struggling with it because they manage, in several cases, to create dependencies without owning. Or they buy something which obviously would mean this is at the end a monopoly. And then the court may say, after whichever procedure, you are not allowed to go ahead because this gives you this monopolist power. Or they may say, okay, go ahead because there is still the possibility that somebody else competes. So this is politically contested because in many cases it is not entirely clear what it means. And then you have other issues. But important is all these things go hand in hand. What we do in economics, we usually look at one point each time, but we have to think about lifestyles with technology change. If everybody has a mobile phone, this is a different story to the situation where few people have a landline. Technology and lifestyle. If transport is easy and cheap, of course it means people go from A to B. If it takes, I don't know how many weeks to go with a horse cart from here to Beijing, this will not be done. Not by many. Today you just do it for a weekend. kind of everybody can do it. I don't know how many years back it had been two people who had been probably considered to be crazy going there with their caravan, not knowing actually what they can expect. We talked about it as well in a different context. And there you see the concepts behind it. It had been Colin Clark, the development of the different sectors, agriculture, moving on to industrial production, moving on to services. This is a socio-technological, economic and ecological process. It is important as well to understand it in this way, because you don't have simply a decrease in the primary sector. It is a relative decrease. We still produce more in this sector. The overall output is higher than before. But there are two reasons for a decrease in the overall concept. The one is productivity increases, meaning I put less work into it, or I put better work into it, so the output is higher. And the other parts increase. That's the second part. You have more industrial production, and if you have two lines, both are increasing. On both sides you find an increase, but here it is larger. You have a higher increase there, so in relative terms, this is lower. In absolute terms, it is still growing. In relative terms, it is decreasing. And this can come to this point that you actually have a turn that seems to go downwards, because the increase here is to such an extent over the increase rate here that you have the impression, not more, that you actually have a downturn here. In terms of output, it's still going up. And you have this with the different sectors, including then the service sector, we have the impression that today everything is about services, production of services. We don't produce anything anymore, we only have services. But somebody still has to produce the apps to link restaurants. Somebody still has to produce the software physically, and then I can use the service. The other concept, if you want, in this context that have been relevant is the Conductive Waves, where you have certain technologies playing a major role in changing the overall structure. You have small changes all the time. It's amazing. This is another thing of better and faster and all this. I'm at this stage, I'm kind of annoyed by looking at my phone and my computer. It tells me sometimes twice per day there is an update available for your apps, for your software. Twice per day. What are they doing? They are just getting bored and producing updates. So this is permanently going on. This has different dimensions. As I said, these small changes. Then you have occasionally a new operating system. I don't know, every 2 years or something. And then you have major changes. And it's difficult to know exactly their meaning, their impact. It's very difficult to find it out. We think the computer and internet connections was a major, massive change in terms of the speed of communication. Pressing the button, you have the email, you have the message. WeChat, it's there. Sometimes you would like it's not there because you pressed by accident. Oh, what happened? Too fast. If you look at it historically, actually the change to the previous technology was not really huge. Before you have had the fax, do you know the fax? Facsimile. Basically, you have had your page, you have been writing something, you put it into this machine, it was going through, it was translated into some signals, and they had been arriving at the other end. Before this, you have had the letter. You wrote a letter, or you made a photocopy of something, or whatever you wanted to send, put it into the envelope, get a stamp, go to the post office, or if you have enough, somebody collects the post in the evening. Depending on where you get it, it's there the next day, it's there the next week, or it's there the next month. The change from the letter, traditional letter post, snail mail, to the fax was a multiple of the difference as we find it from the fax to the email. The impression is a different one. One of the reasons that the impression is a different one is actually the availability. This is a mass product used, a mass consumable. Before the invention of the email or internet, somebody asked me, can you give me a fax number? I was in a bookshop. I will send you a fax to inform you. I said, a fax number? Why? What? Why should I have, as private person, a fax? This was for business. Later, actually, I got one. Not because I opened a business, but because actually it was pretty cheap. If you bought a phone or a fax, it was more or less the same price, so I bought this fax machine, because there was an answer phone as well included. So in this way, it was getting more and more common. But it was not as common as you have today your email on the phone, if you want, or on the computer. And it is something that developed pretty fast. I remember once I saw a guy on a campus in a university. He was shouting and I got an email. He was so happy that he got an email because it was rarely used as means of communication. Today, can you send me an email? Can I phone you as well? I've just sent an email. Don't want to go through this trouble. Can you actually write a letter to me? What is that? We don't do certain things. At least in certain areas. So this is a huge jump in terms of productivity, in terms of technology, which of course changes as well the requirement in terms of capital. If I'm a little bit good in craftsmanship, I can build my house cart, and I just get a horse from somewhere, and that's it. If I need a railway, I can be very good in craftsmanship, but I need a huge amount of money to invest to build the railway, including the tracks. It's as well not just up to me. With a horse cart, at the end of the day, I can, if it's properly built, I can go wherever I want along. I don't need a street. If you look at the old Roman Via Appia Antica, it's amazing how they managed to get across this road with their horse carts. Bumpy, the stairs here are nothing against this. They managed. With the railway, you need a proper rail system. You need a network. This is something you usually cannot do on private channels. We talked about the different stages. We talked about the different developments. And all this matters in terms of the means of production, in terms of productive factors, and in terms of the way we can organize it. As well, mass communication or mass production, mass consumables, means that you need more and different regulation. If there are two people having a car in a city like Changsha, that's it. You have your ways, they can go. Basically, you don't need traffic signs, at least not for the cars, no traffic lights, because it's unlikely that they meet at some stage, even this. If you have the amount of traffic as you have it now, you need a different regulation. As well, you need different regulation when it comes to ownership. So all this matters, and industrialization, capitalization, means as well that we have to talk about these issues, what I called firmization, meaning establishing firms. It was a legal, it was a technical, it was an economic process to have a firm, to have an enterprise. Funnily enough, this aspect had been for a long time neglected in economics. The firm was considered as being there. We didn't have to think about it until somebody had the glorious idea of thinking about it. If you do these tiny things, you get a Nobel Prize. He got the Nobel Prize for it because he said, actually, the firm and the kind of firm we have matters. We should think about what is actually the meaning of having this firm, of having this institution. Then you go to institutionalist economics, that of course it matters. And then we come to problematizing what we talked about before. It matters if you have a large enterprise, large scale, or small scale. It matters on the one hand that it is better to produce on a large scale, but in some cases it is actually not. In some cases, you trade something in, accounting services, finances service. You don't have your own accounting department. In some cases, you have it. Because in economics of scale, it is useful if you are large enough, you have your own accountant or accountant's department, and they work full-time. For your personal tax declaration, you wouldn't employ in a fixed position an accountant. Then you buy it actually in, you trade it in and say, listen, can you do the account for me? It's one week you need for this, and I pay you for this 1 week. If you would be employed by me permanently, I would have to pay you for the entire year to do this 1 week work. So size matters. Location matters in terms of how do we locate our firm related to others. Some things they happened unconsciously. If you look at maps, geography, what do you find? Many successful, and this is going back before capitalism, many successful cities are at points where rivers cross. Many successful cities, this is what you find in China, are along the coast in some area. It's this concentration, agglomeration of resources. And you can say enterprises have as well social capital, meaning they have connection to other enterprises, and of course the connections are better if you have them nearby under certain conditions. If you depend on the communication, direct communication with others, it's good just to be able to go across the corridor or go to the next building instead of taking a 20-hour flight across or half across around the world and say, here I am, could we just talk about half an hour on this topic? And then you fly back. Not relevant? A little anecdote, I lived in Hamburg, Germany at some stage, and monopolies are forbidden. It is as well to agree upon a certain price. It was the petrol industry. So the petrol stations get their petrol from different companies. There are a few major companies who have control over the petrol industry in Germany, in Europe. But they are not allowed, free competition, they are not allowed to agree upon a certain price. Actually, I don't know. Let's say, for the sake of having an example, per liter petrol you pay 1.59. And I try to get under you because I want to sell more. So I pay for 8.59. This is competition. And then this balances. It's not possible, it's not allowed to say, listen, 159 for you, 159 for you, we both get enough. Not allowed. What happens actually, of course you don't want to see any document around that says, listen, can we agree, we change the price tomorrow and we say 160. Not good. You never know if somebody checks your telephone line or whatsoever. Actually, you never do anything that can be used as proof. What you do is, the world is so simple. You have a flower there, you turn it around the one day, and the person at the other window says, okay, price goes up. This is how they work. Occasionally. There are other ways, there are direct ways, and there are documented ways. But sometimes it's really this very simple thing. You turn around a flower pot, which means your neighbor knows what she has to do with the petrol price. Literally. I'm talking about experience now, practice. And you see at some stage, and this is always, we are kind of surprised, how is it possible? The same day you go, the morning you go to work with your car, and you see petrol, 160 now. I just wait, go to the other. 160. I just carry on, And then you see, next petrol station, somebody climbing up the ladder, this was the old times, changing the price, 160. No agreement, but it happens. Is this competition? Is this free competition? There is something happening in the background. Of course you have competition, but at least it is not this completely free pattern that works without agreements. This would be the case if you come to Adam Smith, who actually talked about well, he did, but the typical phrase quoted is the invisible hand of the market. He used the term only once. He used it in relation to international relations. But the idea is now carried on, and this is something he meant in general as well. It is meant to regulate the market, to regulate the price. It's invisible. There is no agreement. There is no planned strategy. But something is there. We said it's individuals, individual actors, rationally behaving. And there is some rationality that guides us all. Because we have the same rationality, we want to make profit. And we want to increase profit. So the basic principle there is the same. And the idea of Smith is there is this invisible hand. As I said, he didn't use it in this context, but it's what he meant. And if you leave things go as they go, by nature, meaning by individuals, then you have the best result that you can get. Highest quality, best price for consumers and producers, the best result for society. As well, that was his assumption, for social issues, for equality. Now, I say this hesitating, and we may go back to this at some stage. There's a little bit wrong understanding. He said, on the one hand, we have this move to a just society, to equality. If everybody behaves and can behave in this competitive way, everybody will get so much that he or she needs, and there will be this kind of everybody gets the same. Free competition. But he was well aware of the fact that this is not the case, and you will have inequality, and there is actually intervention necessary to secure that everybody has enough. But this he was seeing outside of the market, outside of the economic sector, and leaving it to the state to some extent and to charity. He was believing as well, this is important, that actually entrepreneurs will behave in a moral way. They will not overdo exploitation or something. They will be reasonable in this, and they will keep in this way the social will, the national will, in accordance with what individuals need.